this day, 275 years ago, the Battle of Culloden took place, changed Scotland forever. The British ended up destroying a lot of the Scottish forces and ultimately banned tartans, bagpipes, and even the speaking of Gaelic across the Highlands. In this book, The Highland Clans, it describes the Highland charge that started the Battle of Culloden. Here it says, drawn up in lines, the men were neither drilled nor in uniform, but clustered in family groups. Fathers were with their sons, brothers stood together, cousins and uncles stayed close. Many of the officers standing forward to the front rank were related to the men at their back. The oldest and most experienced were always set to the front, for the clansmen believed that courage flowed downward through the generations. Another section of this book talks about how chaotic the battle was. Clans collided as they avoided boggy ground, and the whole line slewed badly to the right. Most of the army on the left, including the powerful MacDonald regiments, never engaged properly, and in less than an hour the prince was being led off the battlefield as he told his officers to save themselves. The person of interest in today's video is Simon Fraser, 11th Lord Lovat. He was captured after the Battle of Culloden and was the last man to be executed on British soil in 1746 by beheading. The story goes that his older brother owned a Dirk that this one is based off of, and ended up killing a bagpiper who played a very satirical song on the pipes. So Simon Fraser came into possession of this particular Dirk. This particular Dirk is nearly 14-inch blade, has 5 holes in this fuller here. There's a etched sort of half circle or semicircle design. The false edge itself runs over half the length of the blade. The pommel has a small little cross ping block, and this is a woven style handle. This is walnut. The original Dirk's handle was made from bog oak or some sort of bog wood. It is only listed as bog wood, but it's very similar to the way that bog oak looks, but you can tell that it's really roughly worn. I'll try to include that in just a second so you can see what the original would look like. The basic soldier would have been outfitted during Culloden with a dirk and a targe. Targe is a small shield, typically some sort of hardwood with a leather covering and some decorative tacks to hold it on. Now this would have been used in conjunction with the dirk. The targe would have been used to knock a opponent's weapon out of the way, and then the dirk would finish them off. A lot of the soldiers at Culloden were just farmers. They weren't trained soldiers whatsoever, so it was an everyman's army. A lot of them had whatever they could find. Pitchforks, there's a large axe called the Lochaber axe. I've been looking in this book, which has a lot of really good reference pictures. It's got a lot of sizes and measurements and things that you would need if you were going to make a dirk. What I cannot find is this particular dirk that is associated with Simon Fraser. But what I was able to find is a lot of pictures from an auction, because it was auctioned off in the US apparently for right around $3,000 US. For my choice in steel for this project, I will be using a old Simmons file. What I'm going to do is keep near this width and then bring it down to a taper. this is what is called a spring swage. These two pieces are what they call fullering swages, and the spring allows it to fit a multitude of sizes and shapes. I use this to do fullers and swords, and I'm going to use this to do the tang into ricasso area on the Dirk. There's a space here on my anvil that I've ground, kind of rounded over in comparison to these fairly sharp corners, and that's what I like to do my tang radius on. Okay, so now we've got the main blank of the Dirk blade and tang forged. Now what we need to do is forge in the bevel. And for those who are just learning about bladesmithing, whenever you forge in a bevel, the upper edge, the spine or the back of the knife, wants to curve. So the way that you counteract that is that you will forge the blade downward, so whenever you hammer in the bevel and it divides or pushes out, it will bring that back up straight the way that it needs to be. So now we have this almost scythe shape. So when we forge in the bevel, it will pull this back edge up almost straight. Now what I'm going to be doing is profiling the blade with this 36 grit shredder belt from Combat Abrasives. So day 2, this is mostly profile ground. This is straightened out. This is brung down to a fairly fine point. I did a little bit of surface grinding, so you can see the bevel now. It's mostly untouched. Before anything, I'm going to take down the surface of this. As you can see, there's still some lines from the file that it used to be. Okay, so now that I've been looking at it, the false edge on the back actually comes a little more than halfway. This calls 7.5 inch false edge. So we're gonna go 7.5, mark it. Okay, now as you can see, this is a very nice clean plunge line, and that is our top false edge. Now here will be our little fuller, and there will be some holes that they described as decorative. I'm not sure of the ceremonial purpose or anything like that, but those will go there. Alright, so this is my fullering tool that I'm going to use. It's just a cheap chisel from Harbor Freight, and the end has been rounded off. now that we have our fuller on either side, you can see that there. Now that we're done with that, and we've got this top false edge on either side, what I'm going to do is mark off holes inside the fuller, and we're going to drill those. Okay, so I'm done with the primary grinds. It's looking pretty good. You can see a little bit of a plunge line here. It's real nice. Top false edge, a little fuller with the holes in it. What we'll need to do next is heat treat. Hardened. We're going to see how hard it is. So I'm just going to take a file to it. And it skates a file. If it skates a file, you know that it's good and hard. So now, all we need to do, some awful lighting, all we need to do is temper it out. It's been heat treated down. Don't really know a precise rock well because I don't have a exact way to measure that. You can no longer tell that it is a file. Now it's just time to clean this up. Where I'm at currently on the blade, but now it needs a handle. So I've got this block. I'm under the impression that this is English walnut because it's a lot lighter and more of a caramel color than American black walnut. Okay, now that we're fresh off the lathe, that is the basic shape. So now that I've got this basic shape and a hole roughly drilled through, the top is actually two holes that are drilled in at angles. Here we have it, but now we're going to have to fit it in through here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace it, and then I'm going to take out the wood so that this will sit into the handle just a bit, and this will stick the rest of the way through our little end cap. Okay, now that this is fitted, got a little bit of a tang that sticks through. I'm going to take some of this brass. This is right about 20 gauge brass sheet, and I'm going to put it on. Okay, now we've got our little brass disc. Start marking in our knots. This is what the pattern will look like when it's finished. Okay, so this is the basic work that we're going to be doing inside this. There will be, I think, 3 or 4 lines in each one of those little basket woven sections. Okay, now all that this really lacks is the stain that I have made. I'm going to put that on there and then kind of age it up. There is some little designs on the blade and also on the spine that I'll be acid etching into this before we permanently set the handle and everything. we've got all that together, we're going to go ahead and make our little cross finally to put on there and peen over. Okay, so this is going to end up being our peen block. There's the cross. Needs a little polishing. Well, now that that's all attached, fit it on there nice and neat. What we'll do is we'll go ahead and stain this rusty vinegar. This is steel wool and vinegar. It's set for about a month, so it's all dissolved. Just kind of muddy, rusty like. A little bit on a paper towel. Okay, so now I'm just going to sand it. Now for the oiling.